Welcome to yet another episode of our series Headline Makers. And today we have with us Mr. Zakka Jacob. He's the managing editor of CNN-News18. And I remember a couple of years back, I had a conversation with him, but the world of news TV has changed since then. And we will go into that debate today. Thank you, Zakka, for joining us.
Thank you, Rohel. Thank you to Exchange for Media for having me on your series, Headline Makers.
Thank you. Let me ask you my first question that when we see TV news today, it has become very polarized. It's become a sort of shouting match. That's what the audience calls it. I don't know if that is right way to describe it, but that's what it is, sometimes. And at the same time, when we see your show, it is not like that. It's very slow in that pace. You can listen to that debate. You let the people explain their point of view. So, you've taken a totally different stand. Where does that confidence come from that this format actually works?
So, Rohel, we've been having this for a few years now. I think to my mind, COVID was really the differentiator, the marker, where we felt this, feedback from our viewers constantly that, we don't want these shouting matches. We can't understand half the time what one guest is saying because he or she is drowned out by somebody else's voice. So basically, we were getting this feedback that people just want to know, what are the big stories that have happened today? Why is it important? Why should we care? Why should we pay attention? And if somebody can give us that in a sort of deep dive, explanatory kind of fashion, then that is something that people are willing to, engage with and willing to consume much more than these debates and the shouting matches. So we made a conscious decision, a few years ago, right after COVID, to say, okay, can we do some more explanatory stuff? So it initially started off in a 1 hour, maybe we'd do 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Now we're looking at about 50 minutes of content in the whole hour, which is mostly about 95% of it is explanatory content. And people are liking it. People are saying that, at least I understand what is happening. He gives me a sense of, in a very calm sort of way, right, that this is what has happened and this is why we should care. So I think this is purely based on, viewer feedback that we've decided to go away from the debate format.
Right. Being engaging and being sensational, these are two extremes for somebody, who's a journalist who's on the prime time. Where do you draw that editorial line, and how do you draw that editorial line between the two?
See, you have to be engaging, no doubt about it, because nobody wants to watch a boring newscast, right? But at the same time, I think the line, as you said, has to be, are you true to the facts? Are you, replicating whatever happened to the best possible degree? I don't think journalists or journalism should be in the job of inflating the truth. Be as close as you can to the truth. And, the way to do it engagingly is, newer formats, appealing to younger people and so on. But if I'm a firm believer that if the news story itself is compelling and it holds your attention, then you don't have to add this extra masala and make it extra sensational, because right, the story is strong enough. It's like in the movies, right? If the script is good, the movie will hold. So in the same way, if the news, the core of the news is good and it's engaging and it's riveting, then you don't need to add extra layers to it to make it sensational or dramatic in the hope that it's appealing to a cross-section of viewers.
Right. We've also seen the rise of YouTube news, journalists going to YouTube in large numbers, in fact, and people going and watching them there. How do you see this kind of emerging trend? Is it a competition or is it kind of complementary to the kind of news that we used to?
No, so certainly I don't think it's a competition, because many of these YouTube podcasters are, standalone individual journalists who run a fairly small operation, right? Which can never replace traditional big legacy media players like CNN News 18, because, the resources that we bring to bear and covering, important news stories is not a cheap business. It's an expensive proposition. You need to have reporters, you need to have camera persons, video editors, graphic designers, and there is an inherent trust that the viewer has with a big network like Network 18. Like if a story appears on CNN News 18, okay, we know that this is true. Whereas with individual podcasters and YouTubers, they, by their very nature, they can tend to be a little, alarmist or a little sensational, as you said a moment ago, because ultimately they are a very small operator. They're in a very crowded field. They're trying to, not be outshouted. They want to appeal to the maximum audience as possible. Whereas I think traditional media players will always have a role, and I don't think YouTube will sort of take over traditional media. What is interesting though is over the last couple of years, including in CNN News 18, and I know in other legacy media players as well, there's a lot more emphasis on catering to younger audiences, digital audiences, whether it's on social media platforms like YouTube or Instagram. So we have entire divisions that are catered to appealing to that audience. So it is making traditional news organizations more nimble, more quick on their feet, and also the ability to attract newer audiences. I think that is something that is in great emphasis in the last few years,
Right.
and CNN News 18 is no exception. I don't think YouTube or YouTubers will be a competition,
Right.
but I think it's helping us become more agile.
Right. You talked about younger audiences. Do you think there's a certain kind of fatigue among the audience overall when it comes to news on TV?
Well, see, TV will always have its sort of dedicated audience. I mean, there used to be a time when Ruel, this appointment viewing and things like that. But maybe today there isn't as much appointment viewing. Today, I think you have to go where the viewer is. So if the viewer is on, YouTube Shorts or on Instagram Reels, then you have to make that content appealing in these 1 minute packages or these bite-sized packages, which is appealing enough to a younger audience. I think people are consuming a lot of news. There's a lot of interest in news. You take any of the big stories of late, right? Whether it's the elections, whether it is Trump, there's a lot of interest in what is happening around the world. It's just that today the viewer is demanding in a way that broadcast companies, whether it's TV companies, digital media, have to be adaptable to give that content where the viewer wants it. So if it's on the phone, if it's on connected TV, if it's on social media like YouTube, Instagram, etc., you have to go where the viewer is. Whereas 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the viewer would come to you. That's why we had this whole concept of appointment viewing. Today, I don't think that's the case. You have to take the content to where the viewer is, and I think again, it's a great challenge. It's a great opportunity
Right.
for traditional media companies.
As someone who has seen the changing phase of TV news landscape, what are the biggest challenges that you face today when it comes to managing teams and ensuring quality editorial at the same time in a 24/7 kind of a cycle?
So one challenge certainly is about talent. I think we need better talent coming into the industry, and also what's also happening is, and it tends to happen that good people, young people, after 2 or 3 years, either they get fatigued or they feel like there aren't enough opportunities for them, so they move out of traditional newscasting, traditional broadcasting, and I think that's a big challenge. Not only to catch them young and broaden the catchment area, but also to try and retain them, 2, 3, 4 years. Because, I always maintain this, journalism, just like any other profession, if you have to really blossom and open up, it has to be after the first few years. And the first few years, you're just learning the tricks of the trade, you're learning the ropes of the game. After about 4 or 5 years is when you really start, coming into your own. And at that time, one of the things that we've noticed is some good people tend to sort of leave the industry, which I don't think is a good thing for the industry. So I think both ability to attract talent and to retain talent, I think is one area where we are focused on.
Right. And we've seen recent revamp of the screen as such. We've seen new graphic, new architecture, visual architecture. How does it align with your editorial philosophy, according to you, overall? What are the bigger changes that are there?
So if you've noticed it, Roel, our screen is probably the cleanest screen. I mean, there is very little, over the top graphics, or very very little, jarring colors. It's a very simple, clean screen, and I think one of the philosophies driving that screen architecture was also, like I said, viewer feedback. Viewers were saying, keep it simple. Don't give us very very complicated stuff. You don't have to make the graphics so in your face. So it's very clean. It's very digital friendly. I think even on the mobile phone, when we are watching, on a mobile phone, you want it to be as clutter free as possible. You want it to be as clear, crisp, concise. So what we've done with the new look and the philosophy behind the new look is, we're dropping the chaos, we're dropping the clutter, we're dropping the clickbait, and we're simply just saying that CNN News 18 makes sense. It makes sense of your world. It makes sense of what has happened around you in the day, and it makes sense of all of those developments for you. So I think it's a clean screen, it's a clutter-free architecture, and I think it's in keeping with what a 21st century viewer in India is demanding. That don't dumb down the news to me, don't talk down to me, but give it to me in a way that it is engaging, it's clear, it's concise, and it speaks to me.
If we take 5 years into account, do you think TV news has become more intelligent than it was? I mean, which way has it kind of come around?
I think so. I think so because I think, like I said, the viewers are now putting pressure on traditional media companies to give them more intelligent content, to give them content which is appealing to their sensibilities. They don't want, as you said, at the beginning of this interview, they don't want these shouting matches. I think we were getting that feedback over a period of time, and we have responded to that feedback. We are now, a lot less these shouting matches and high decibel debates. We are trying to focus much more about getting in depth into a story, give more explanatory formats for our viewers, and also to try and enhance the insight on each of these stories without having to rise up the decibel level. So it's more you shine the light rather than raise the noise.
Right. No, and in fact, there's a big change. The way it used to happen, that everything was breaking news, and you'll get a big
Yes.
graphic. We don't see that very often now,
Exactly.
right?
We don't see that. And we've consciously sort of, moved out of making everything into a breaking news. Everything does not need to be a breaking news. And similarly, like I said, all these jarring colors and, in your face graphics, we've completely dropped that because our viewers, are intelligent enough to know when a story is big. You don't need, jazzed up graphics to make a story big. When a story is big, the viewer intelligently knows that the story is big and why he or she should pay attention to that story. So that's what we're going for, and we are responding to viewer feedback that we get. And I think we've got positive feedback so far for the clean look, for the change of format, and going away from all of this high decibel debates and focusing much more on an in-depth sort of way to present stories and to engage viewers in that storytelling.
I also want to know from you that, according to you, what is the single biggest misconception the public holds, the viewers hold about television news today?
Well, I think viewers tend to think that television, so again, like you said earlier, it's very polarized, right? So the viewers are also very polarized. So there's one section that thinks, oh, that the entire media is a sellout. There's another section that thinks, oh, these guys are too liberal. So I think the truth really is somewhere in between, right? The media is trying to do its job, which is basically to hold power
Mhm.
to account, to speak truth to power, as it were. And we're doing that to the best of our ability. Are there constraints? Of course, there are constraints, and there have always been constraints. It's not a new phenomena. But I think the misconceptions of the media are also born of the polarization that we are seeing within our viewers. Like I said, one group which feels, oh, these guys are too liberal, they don't understand the real India, and then there's one group that feels like, oh, these guys are all sellouts, they just give you whatever the government version of events are. I don't think the truth is in either of these two extremes. The truth is far more nuanced, and somewhere in between these two extremes.
Right. In your experience, I mean, how do you kind of manage your everyday routine. I know news TV is tiring. You've been
Yeah.
there for some time. How do you really, what keeps you going with the same kind of energy? I met you 5 years back. I see more energy. What
W-
really keeps you going?
Well, it can get exhausting sometimes, but I keep very long days. My first messages to our news groups are at like 6:30 in the morning, telling people, these are the stories that we should chase, or the papers have reported these stories. Why don't we follow up on the lead on this? We have our first morning, editorial con call at 8:45 in the morning. Then we have a group editors meeting at 11 o'clock, which is a physical in-person meeting. Then our channel meeting, which decides, what goes into prime time, which show does what, who are the guests that we can get. That happens at noon. And then there's an evening meeting, preparing for the next day, which happens at about 7 o'clock. So, you know, it's constantly on the churn. Like I said, it's long working hours. But I think the fun about this profession is every day is a new story. Something new can break, something new can happen every single day. And I think there's that adrenaline rush that you get with covering something new every single day. And no other profession, allows you to do that. Like if you're a banker, you're pretty much doing the same thing 365 days. If you're a lawyer, you're pretty much doing the same thing 365 days. Whereas in journalism, that's the beauty about this profession. Anything can happen on any given day. One day you could be talking about a controversy around a comedian, a stand-up comedian. The next day you could be talking about Trump. The third day you could be talking about something else. I think it's that variety that this profession inherently allows you, which keeps us all going.
A couple of more questions. In terms of content that we see on TV screens, news, do you think we're still obsessed with politics, or have we really kind of given it its space and then we moved on to covering other things? Or is the Indian television, the TV news space, still obsessed with?
So, look, politics still, I think, dominates, no doubt about it, because that's the nature of the medium. But if you were to look at CNN News 18, I can only speak for CNN News 18. We have, for example, a breakfast show. It's called The Breakfast Club. It does zero politics. 1 hour, it's just news you can use. It's about questions that you have about parenting, about health. Basically that matters in your everyday life. We have one half an hour show every day at 1:30, which is just the South. And it's not just politics from the South. We just focus on all the stories from the South. We have weekend entertainment shows. In fact, two of them that run over the weekend, which are again about the big movies that have released or the big OTT releases. So I don't think it's entirely dominated by politics. Of course, politics will continue to be, let's say, about 50% of the content. But the other 50% is sports, is entertainment. We have a sports and an entertainment vertical. Cricket Next is our sports vertical. Shosha is our entertainment vertical. And we are constantly, taking stories from those verticals and putting it in our news wheel every day, in a 1 hour wheel. If let's say about 30, 35, 40 minutes is about the big news stories, the remaining 15, 20 minutes are either sports or entertainment or news you can use or, health, things that are valuable in the everyday life of a viewer. So yeah, while the skew will continue to be on politics, I think we are certainly making a conscious attempt to do more, you know, news you can use rather than just bang on about politics.
Right. Beyond India, do you think our news channels are making any dent beyond? Are we really making kind of a dent in the narrative that is kind of spun by the foreign media in that way? Do you think we are really being watched outside India as well?
I think so. I think so. In fact, not just being watched outside, that's one part of it. But I think even in India, there's a great deal of interest in foreign news, because ultimately our viewers realize it's an interconnected world. Today, if Mr. Trump says, I'm going to raise tariffs, that's going to have an effect on
Tomorrow is
India
the
as
big
well.
day. I
Yeah.
mean, day
And,
after
and,
tomorrow.
and, and in
Yes.
a couple of days
Yeah.
is the big day for the reciprocal tariffs and so on. So I think there's a great deal of interest here in India for what's happening around the world and vice versa. The rest of the world is also paying a lot of attention to India because I think it's natural as your economy progresses, as your economic and political heft in the world increases. Everybody is looking to what does India have to say. Like, for example, I remember when the Russia-Ukraine war happened, when it first began, and India took the position that we're on the side of peace. We're neither against Russia nor against Ukraine. I think people paid attention to it. I mean, the international community paid attention to it. Similarly, when the war in Gaza started, India took a position on it, and people paid attention to what India had to say. So I think increasingly, as we go into the 2020s and the 2030s, India's place in the world and India's voice in the world will only be much more magnified and much more important. And I think news channels play a role in that, because ultimately, how does the world consume what India is thinking or how India is shaping foreign policy? It's by consuming Indian news, right? So I think Indian news channels have a very important role to play in that, as to put out India's point of view and why India has taken a certain position in certain issues. I think that is going to be of prime importance going forward as well.
I earlier said a couple of questions, but these are now a couple of questions.
Okay.
Just two more. When you look back at your journey, what would you call your biggest learnings?
Well, it's always about people, Rohil. That's the one thing that I've learned. I mean, this is my fifth year. I've just finished 5 years as managing editor. This is my 11th year in Network 18 and CNN News 18. And it's always about, if you can take people along, if you make people feel invested in the product, make people feel invested that, what he or she is doing is important and it is making a difference to people's lives, people will always give you more than what you ask them. I think it's about leadership with purpose. Every day we come into the newsroom, and I see the youngest of young people in our newsroom who are very, very driven. They know that this is not like any other ordinary profession. It may not be the biggest paymaster in that sense, but you feel like you're doing something. You feel like you're making a difference to somebody's life. And I think as long as you have that purpose-driven motivation to come into this profession and to be part of this profession, which a lot of our people in our newsroom feel, I think that is the biggest motivating factor. If you invest in people, people will take care of the product. You are just a facilitator, and I keep telling this to young people in our newsroom. I'm only as strong as you guys are. I mean, if you make us strong and if you make the product strong, my success is actually in a reflected glory of what you bring to the table. My job is to be a facilitator, and I try to do that to the best of my ability. I think that's the biggest motivation factor, the biggest motivating factor in this profession has always got to be people.
Wonderful. My final question about the future of TV news, the linear TV. Where do you see it's going? It's headed towards.
See, earlier on I said you have to go to where the viewer is. So if the viewer is on mobile phone, the viewer is on social media, the viewer is on connected TV, you have to go to the viewer where the viewer is and give him or her the content that they're asking for. Yes, there was a time, 10 years ago where we could say, okay, everybody will come and watch the 9 o'clock news. I don't think that is the case anymore. Today, you can do a show at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and people will still be talking about it on social media, on YouTube, on X, on Facebook, etc. I think the real, the path forward for news television is, you have to be diversified enough to be in mediums where the viewer is going. So if it's Instagram Reels, if it's YouTube Shorts, that's where you need to be going. And two, inherently, I think people will always be curious about what is happening around them. I mean, ultimately, what is news? You want to know what has happened around you, why it's important, how it affects your life, and why you should pay attention. That is inherently a human nature. I don't think you can change that. Whether they consume that off regular television or connected TV or social media, those things will change. The medium might change, but the content has to be good. It has to appeal to the viewer, and that inherent curiosity will always be there. And I think channels like CNN News 18 are trying to quench that inherent curiosity of the intelligent viewer, and I think we're proud to be playing a small part in that.
So well said, and thank you. Really, really a lot of takeaways from this interview. Thank you, Mr. Jacob, for joining us on this episode of Headline Makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahel. Thank you to Exchange for Media for having me. Thank you so much.